Pay transparency is a legal precedent that has taken our country by storm, and it's estimated that 50% of US states are eventually going to have pay transparency laws. Now, if you want to know why pay transparency is key to helping you attract and recruit more diverse, qualified talent, let's dive into this episode.
Welcome to Hire Breakthrough, a podcast dedicated to helping entrepreneurs like you take the breakdown out of their hiring breakthrough. If you're a founder who is ready to take back control and build your A-team without the overwhelm, you are in the right place. Your host, Kimon Napier, is a hiring strategist, speaker, consultant, and CEO of Hire Breakthrough. We're on a mission to help founders like you connect with the right talent to scale higher. Your time is way too valuable to stay stuck, and we want to show you how to stop chasing unicorns, take an intentional approach to your talent strategy so you can make your next right hire. Let's get started.
Welcome to this edition of the Hire Breakthrough podcast. My name is Kimon Napier, aka The Hiring Strategist, and today we're going to talk all about pay transparency. So I know this is a big topic that a lot of people have been wondering about. What is pay transparency? How can I use pay transparency to have a positive effect on human resources in my organization, your overall, culture in your organization? So we're going to dive into that. So before we get started, the first thing I want to do is actually define what pay transparency is. So pay transparency is when an employer is straightforward in sharing salary and compensation information at the beginning of the hiring process. So that would mean like listing all the compensation information on the job description so prospective candidates can make an informed decision prior to applying or interviewing for a position. Pay transparency can also mean that your organization or your company is going to transition to a place where it is open data about what everyone is making in the organization. So for example, what that could look like is, let's say you have a company of like 25 people and you want to implement pay transparency within your organization moving forward. So if you're going to start listing out salaried in the job descriptions you put out moving forward, what you also want to do is actually list out that information for your internal employees already. So what that could look like is that you have some type of salary band or something that it lets employees know where they fall on the band and what everybody's making. So there's not this like underlying theme is like, is this person making more of me? Is this person making less than me? And so forth. I mean, I can say from corporate experience that, working in union environments, working with Fortune 500 companies, all the types of companies that I have worked with, when pay and salary hasn't been necessarily upfront, there is always a sense of wonder amongst employees and almost a sense of resentment. So for example, in like a union environment, typically, for the most part, people start off making the same thing if they have the same title, but there were instances where that was just not the case, and always was a sense of wonder for employees. But now, moving forward, there are so many pay transparency laws that have been put into effect. And before I dive into that, I'm going to talk about why pay transparency really is significant. So it's gaining a lot of traction in the past few years because employers and HR professionals have realized that not listing the information was resulting in frustration with prospective candidates. And it was also just a waste of time. I mean, if you think about it, you don't list the salary. You might engage with an employee, a prospective employee or a candidate. And, once you love this person, you're interviewing them. And once you get down to salary and budget, you realize that you wasted time. Even if it's on the first interview, you've realized that you've wasted time because your budget and the candidate's salary expectations were misaligned. So I'll give you statistics. The Society of Human Resource Management, that's SHRM, released data on Equal Pay Day, which is March 14th. So I'm going to use this of March 14, 2023. And it shows that amongst 1,300 human resource professionals surveyed, 42 of their organizations or more operated in a location that requires job postings to include pay ranges. So to give you, that statistics, it really is starting to take effect. Now, I'm going to give you some of the states that already have pay transparency laws in effect. So it's a list of states: California, Connecticut, Colorado, Maryland, Nevada, New York recently put theirs into effect, Rhode Island, Washington. And remember, they're state level, and then you can also have cities and counties that have pay transparency laws. So for example, there's New York State, but there's also New York City. And although New Jersey doesn't necessarily have one in effect, there is one in effect in Jersey City. So all of these laws vary between state, city, and county. Now, the interesting part with all of that is that also the fines are different. So let's say, for example, if you're breaking the law and you're not listing, the salary on job descriptions that you have out there, fines can be as low as $100, but I've also seen fines that could be as high as $250,000 per violation. So that's something that you really want to check in your state, city, or county. Now, this is the thing. Pay transparency laws can also apply to remote jobs, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that. So if your job is remote, that means the position can land anywhere. And if the position lands in one of these states and it doesn't have that information, technically you are breaking the law and you can get fined. And now, of course, you get fined if, somebody, the wrong person sees it, or if it gets reported. So the moral of the story is, when in doubt, just list the salary. Just list the salary and compensation information just to make your life easier. And you'd be surprised. I've seen some of the biggest companies who are not in effect with that law, and it goes to show that obviously they don't care, or they don't have significant HR help on their staff, or they don't have maybe people operations department, depending on the organization, or they don't have somebody in recruitment who understands these laws. And this is the reason why you want to make sure that you have adequate help on your team to help you with all these things, because why pay extra money if you don't need to pay extra money? And so, like I said, moral of the story is to list the salary or the salary range when in doubt. So let's talk about why. Let's talk about the reasons why pay transparency is a pro, right? We'll talk about that. We can talk about cons later, but let's start with the good stuff. Now, pay transparency is going to reduce pay inequity. Now, this is a huge one. If you're an organization or company and you value equity, like let's say it's something that's very important to your brand, it's something you believe in, your mission and your vision is tied to that, it's going to help you reduce the pay inequity. So for years, there's been huge disparities in wages between employees of different gender or races. And by sharing salary information, you as an employer can make, real big steps to ensuring a fair working environment for all. For example, recently, information came out that, at Google, there was a huge wage disparity between their Black employees versus, their Caucasian employees. And so that's at like Google, which is a huge company. So by sharing information, you can make those steps. Now, of course, publicly, that's not a good look for Google, because what it says is that although outwardly you put all this information about being equitable and diversity and being inclusive, but internally, when it comes to paying people and their salaries, you have some disparities there. And so no one wants to end up in that situation. So that's one of the reasons why pay transparency can actually help with that. And it gives you a unique advantage, because it displays a pledge to this work. It displays the value, and you're cultivating a culture of transparency. So it's going to enable the candidates who are interested in working with your company to make informed decisions about whether they want to work with you or not. And it's going to decrease the potential for salary discussions, clashes later on. Like I can remember, being in HR and having those discussions, or even being somebody in the job hunting process and having those discussions, that it just takes a lot of time. Whereas if you have a range, I already know what the range is. As a candidate, I know how much it is that I want to make. You could even ask that on your application. And so therefore it just saves everyone a lot of time. So reducing pay equities. Another thing that I talked about is building this transparent culture. So I know a lot of companies, a lot of startups talk about being transparent, but it really starts in your hiring process. And so if that is not transparent with in terms of salary and compensation, how transparent are you? You know what I mean? And I've found that a lot of companies that are transparent, they're viewed very differently in the job hunting process than other companies, because candidates just don't have time to waste. People are applying to jobs, and 9 times out of 10, if you're not hearing back, one of the reasons could be that you're just not upfront with it. People just are like, I just want to know how much like you're going to pay me if I was to take this job, if I was to get this job. And like I said, it saves so much time because it also encourages a culture of respect. So it has a positive effect, of course, publicly, but also internally, with how your employees, with how prospective candidates are going to look at your values. So, I remember working in a number of places where people found out another person made more than them. And although they had the same title, responsibilities, and start date, it created this awkwardness and a sense of mistrust that can easily spread throughout the same company. So when everyone knows what the other is making, there's this level of trust and respect between employees and the company. So that's also another pro there. Now, let's talk about things that people would probably view as a potential con. Pay transparency also causes less room for negotiation. So some people view that as a con because since salary and compensation information is public, prospective candidates and employees are less likely to negotiate hiring salaries. So for example, there are times in the past where, let's say, if you have applied to a role and the salary information or compensation information hasn't been listed there, even if it has been listed there, what can happen is that they give you an offer and you can come back and say, this is what you were, this is what you would consider with the offer and so forth. And because it's transparent, it lessens the room for that. So some people view that as a con. I personally don't necessarily feel like it could be viewed as a con, but I don't think it's a big deal because to me, if somebody's upfront about that, and if it's not something that is not for you, you just move on and apply for something else that is within the salary requirements that you're looking for. So that's a potential con. The other thing is that this one is actually, there is some actual realness to this one. Pay transparency can also make it difficult for small businesses to attract quality talent. Now, this is a huge one because I've seen a lot of small businesses, and when I say small businesses is technically defined as a company with, under 100 employees. But let's say if this is the first time you're hiring somebody, or, maybe it's the 5th or the 10th time, you're still considered a pretty small business. So the premise is that it can make it difficult because a lot of small businesses, what they will do is they'll hesitate from actually posting that information out of embarrassment because they don't necessarily have maybe a large budget to attract the talent that they need. So ultimately, if you're a small business, you're competing for the same talent as larger companies. And, this is for, small startups as well could apply to this. So now the law for pay transparency, also a nugget for you, it does vary depending on your state, city, or county. But some laws require companies with 4 or more employees to comply with pay transparency laws. New York is one of those states and one of those cities that actually does that. And it varies all over depending on your state, city, and county, like I had said. So as a result of this, a company with a smaller budget or a smaller company If they don't have the money or the bandwidth or the big salary, they may not get quality applicants because the overall salary is less competitive and it's usually under market value. So this is a big one. Now, what I would say for this, if you are in the situation and you are a small business and you're trying to attract quality talent, in my experience, because of course, my company, we recruit talent for businesses of all sizes. In my experience, what will help you with that? You're still going to stand out by listing that information up front with candidates. Now, I'm not telling you to, of course, be out here paying people like $10, an hour or something like that. But let's say you have a very entry level role. Maybe your budget for the role is somewhere between $15 to $20 an hour, like very, very basic in terms of maybe like an hourly rate, or the rate you're using to figure out the salary. Regardless of that, you actually listing that information will speak values to the type of organization or company that you are creating. And you'd be surprised as to who applies for your roles by you being so transparent. Also, with that being said, it's a lot of things come into play here. It's not only about the salary, it's about what you do as a company, your values. Some people don't necessarily want to work with these big organizations and companies like Google, Amazon, and so forth. Some people would rather work with a smaller company. And so although this could be potentially looked at as a con, it could be used to your advantage as well, because it will show that you are being transparent, because pay transparency contributes to overall transparency. So if you as a company are transparent about what people are paid at various levels, even just from earlier on in the game, it really shows like this is the type of brand that you're building, and people will get excited to work with you. So that's actually a good workaround for all this. That's how you can use this all to your advantage. And so moving forward, we're estimating, well, I shouldn't say we, but it's estimated that 16 more states, and including the District of Columbia, are considering passing laws this year and early next year about pay transparency. And eventually it's looking like 50% of the country is going to be covered under a pay transparency law. So embracing pay transparency is a really good move for anyone who identifies as a CEO or startup founder or business owner, if you're hoping to draw in more talented experts. You're going to be creating a culture of receptiveness and reasonability. And so it's going to help you create a more motivated and connected labor force, because, right, it's not going to have the stuff that we talked about before. Oh my gosh, what is my colleague making? Are they making more than me? Should I have negotiated more? It creates this level of mistrust. And I'm telling you from personal experience that this can spread rapidly in your organization, which is not something that you necessarily want. So this is how you can use pay transparency, particularly if you identify as a small business or startup, to your advantage. You're going to be creating this culture of, like I said, transparency overall. It's going to help you to stand out from the crowd, because of course, a lot of companies are still not doing this. This is a very new concept for a lot of people, believe it or not. And so you'll be able to have a more motivated and connective talent force that is going to help progress your company forward. So this is how pay transparency can really help you. This is the reason why it's important. And so hope that you got value from this episode. So thank you for tuning into this episode. If you're a business owner ready to move from a team of none to a scalable and profitable team, be sure to join my Build a Breakthrough Team community. This is a community that I created for those of you who are ready to build the teams you need to stop being the employee and be the true CEO. You can join the free community by visiting higherbreakthrough.com/group. So I hope this episode was extremely helpful. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, please rate and review the podcast episode below, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Are you ready to stop chasing unicorns and hire diverse, qualified talent, but you need help with the full hiring process? If so, be sure to visit hirebreakthrough.com/scale so our team can help make your next right hire today.